Hi there. My name is Mame Leslie, and I will be instructing you on the project management area of developing your model of entrepreneurship. As an introduction, as I said, my first name is Mame, my last name is Leslie, and I've been working with Professors John and Lisa Dobson, teaching teachers about entrepreneurship in various countries. Currently, I am the Vice President of Marketing for PMI Houston and completing my certification from Harvard in entrepreneurship and innovation. I have been a project manager for the past 20 years, and I have been a project management professional, a PMP, since 2007. I've taught project management to business professionals and people new to project management around the world. All right, so what is project management? Project management is something that creates value and provides benefits to people and organizations. We use project management every day. There are three main focuses I'd like to discuss. The first one being on time. Did we follow our timeline? Did we meet our deadline? The next being the budget. Did we stay within our budget for people and expenses? And finally, was the project a success? Did we complete what we said we would do? Within project management, there are phases we should be aware of. I thought this was a fun illustration to show the sequential phases of a project, from initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and control, and closure. Within each phase, there are specific tasks that must be performed. For instance, in the initiation phase, we know that we want to grow a tree. We need to decide what type of tree do we need? How big do we want it to grow? We need to plant the right seeds. We need to plan where to plant the seeds. And for each of these remaining phases, we need to consider other tasks needed to complete the project. To go into more detail into these phases, let's take a look. In the initiate phase, this is where the sponsors describe to us what they want. What are the objectives for this project? What are the measurements for success? The next phase, planning. How many people will you need to perform the work? What will each person do? When does the project need to be completed? We can plan backwards from the finish date to find out what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. What are the costs for materials? What is the scope of the project and what is not in scope for the project? Keep in mind, we might need to adjust this due to the unknown or unexpected risks or issues that happen impacting our deadline. Our next phase, execution. In this phase, what are you and your team going to do? What does the schedule look like? When are you doing specific tasks? This is when you could hit some major milestones for the sponsor. They may ask for your team to produce the deliverables to check the product quality. For example, you may meet with the sponsor and your team to discuss your team status reports or increments of the finished product. The next phase, monitor and control. In this phase, you will document when tasks are to be completed, observe any difficulties, and adjust as needed, your people, tasks, or assignments, or even the budget. We do this in a formal process called change control, where we document an unexpected requirement or unexpected delay due to weather. The documentation will help us to assess how much impact there will be to the timeline if needed. Finally, the closing phase. In this phase, we finalize the deliverables. We demonstrate the final product to the stakeholders, who is everyone involved in the product, and we get the signatures, acceptance, or approvals from the sponsors. Notice the graphic on the top right of this slide. Once the project starts, we will be into the monitoring and controlling phase throughout the planning and execution. For instance, if we are in the execution stage and we have an unexpected rain that will impact our work, we should go back to the planning stage to make sure we document the cause and delay, which in this case was the weather, and update the schedule to account for the possible delay. Then get back to executing to get back to our timeline. All right, next slide. Our action plan. I created a worksheet for you to use called a project summary document. I've completed these worksheets and put them into a workbook that I will give you to use. In this specific example, we would put the project description right here. In this case, I need a garden width. I need to start by. This is the estimate for completion date. I need to finish by. Then I move on to my plan of action. For instance, people. How many people do I need? What skills do they need? Do I need to train them? Budget. How much money will I need to get to do this? This includes the cost of the people, materials, and contingency for if something changes, like the weather. Materials. Do I need to buy any materials? Can I use my existing equipment? Timeline. When can we start? When does this project need to be done? What are the internal deadlines I need to meet along the way? Next, the list of our activities, tasks, when they need to be done, and who needs to do it. For example, I need to go to the store, or someone on my team needs to go to the store. The tasks that need to be done going to the store is buy seeds, buy soil, and buy equipment. Finally, materials. This is where we list our estimates for the cost of our materials. Again, this is an estimate over here on the tasks for date, as well as an estimate on the cost for materials. Again, we see the seeds, soil, and equipment. And in this case, the equipment we want to look at is our shovel, fertilizer, and a hoe. These are estimates for how much this would cost me. Next slide. Our next slide is a workbook example. So again, I will show you a blank sheet and then I will show you the filled out worksheet example. Okay, here is our worksheet, very similar to what you just saw on the last slide. This time we will get a little more detailed. Here we go. I filled this in as an example. In the first box, I put my project name. In this case, it's blueberries for Germany and the Netherlands. Next, I will write my project completion date, March 15th, which I know is the end of the blueberry harvest season. Germany is expecting their order on January 15th, and the Netherlands is expecting their order on February the 15th. March 15th is my date to close the project. Next, in the description of the project or the objective of the project, for example, the objective of this project is produce 7 pints of fresh blueberries per tree. And I have 2 orders to complete that in. Order 1 for Germany needs to be done at the end of January. They want 150 pints, and that equates to 22 to 30 trees. Order 2 is to the Netherlands, and they want 450 pints, which is 64 to 90 trees. A little more detail, as you can see. Next, I'll write a high-level plan for the project, and that's here. This plan would include people, budget, materials, and a timeline. In this case, we're going to estimate we need 4 people for 5 months, and that's going to be 3,200 hours, which will equate to $86,720,000 $6,000 for the people alone. Our materials estimate here, our contingency is 20% of our total. And I will get into more detail on this, on how we calculate this on the next sheet. And then we come up with our final budget. And I've listed again the timeline. We have two timelines, one in January the 15th, the second one February the 15th. Next, I'll write down some assumptions. We didn't see this before. Some assumptions that I should note are that for blueberry trees, the seeds will need to be planted 90 days prior to harvest. So that's important when it comes to our planning. I'll need to assess if I should buy old equipment or if I can use my existing equipment and save some money. I'm going to assume that each blueberry tree yields 5 to 7 pints. So I can assume that I need to plant 30 trees from Germany, and I need to plant 90 for the Netherlands, a total of 120 trees. Now, the details on the plan. I'll write down some tasks that I know need to be done and the date that I know they need to be done. Now, we did this just before. We need to go to the store, buy seeds, soil, and equipment. And I'm going to estimate my date that I need to have that done. Remember, the seeds need to be done 90 days prior to the harvest. So we should keep that in consideration. Okay. And finally, we will go over the materials, what I estimate each will cost. Now, these are estimates, but you should put in what you think they will cost. For the seeds, these are estimations, soil. Okay, and then equipment. We've discovered that we need containers for each of these trees. So I'm going to assume I need 120 of those multiplied by the cost of each container. Next slide. Our planning. Planning is so important. We need to keep in mind our personal, our objectives, and our costs. And by personal, I mean the people. What is it going to cost to keep people on this project? We'll need to assign team roles. And as you can tell, we have 3 roles on this particular project and tasks that fall under each role. Anyone involved in this project is called a stakeholder. Next, we make sure that everyone is aware of our objectives. Ensure the entire team understands what needs to be done. In our example earlier, we said we had 2 orders, one for Germany and one for the Netherlands. As you can see, we have 2 objectives here. Finally, the cost of the materials. So the cost of the materials, the people that work for you, the equipment that's needed, all of the above. Next slide, managing the schedule. Timeline. This picture represents a timeline for a project. The red dotted line symbolizes today. Now, all projects have a start and end date. That's the definition of a project. We will identify the key milestones or the major dates to get specific tasks completed. You can use this to track if you are ahead of schedule or behind schedule. To-do lists and activity lists, as you can see, there are tasks over here with a start and end date. This timeline shows the activities start and end for each of these tasks. Deadlines. Timelines are helpful to manage the project and be able to manage changes if needed to meet those deadlines. Some would say milestones could be considered a deadline. Each of these tasks have their own deadline, and the project has a final deadline. All right, slide 11, estimating the cost of the project. Cost could be for people, materials, or changes, which we call contingency. Materials and equipment. You will want to use your estimate for cost of materials and track the actual cost. And this worksheet will help you to do so. This is an example of a weekly budget sheet. At the top, you see an estimate column, an actual column, and the difference. In the second column, you'll see your expenses. You can see the total income, the expenses, and the total remaining. Total equals the total income minus expenses. So in this case, you'll see your total income is 200 million, minus your expenses, 110 million. Remainder is 90 million. Okay, another example. So this was our estimate. In reality, we actually had an income of 175,000 to start. We had expenses of 125 million, and I apologize, that's 175 million minus the expenses of 125 million, and we have 50 million remain. Finally, the difference. The difference is our estimate minus our actual. And in this case, the difference is 40 million. In the fourth column, we'll take the difference. Now, finally, you should be able to calculate the actual spend on the project to date. In this example, we're estimating needing 90,000 right here. In our estimate, we need 90,000. And in reality, we only needed 50,000. So we're off by 40,000. In this case, notice our actual income to start was off. We thought we had 200,000, and in reality, we had 175,000. For our expenses, we thought we had 110,000, but we actually spent more with 125,000. This is neither good nor bad, but rather it depends on how much work remains to be done. You know that you actually have 50,000 remaining in the project because of our actual column right here. Now let's get into some daily examples on how you would fill this out for the week. So this sheet is each day of the week and a space for you to enter your cost estimates and actual costs. So again, here's your estimates and here are your actuals. And in this case, our estimate for our equipment, our seed, soil, and equipment was $30. Our actual was $33. So we are $3 over. So that tells us we need to be careful. We actually spent more than we planned or estimated. Another example. In this case, on a different day, we went back to the store and we estimated, right? We estimated $30. And in reality, we spent 19. So the difference between 30 and 19 is 14. So we actually came out on top. This is good news. Our estimate was less than the actual, or our actual, excuse me, was less than our estimate. I apologize. So we're on top with $14 remaining. All right, we've got another workbook example. And this example I will provide to you. First, let's look at what it actually looks at from a high level. Here you will put your project name, your start and finish date, and who is managing the project at the top. Then we'll see our date, tasks, work to be done, and this is in hours, the estimate hours or in the actual hours, and what that cost was. Materials, the estimate number of materials times our estimate of what that costs, and then finally our cost. Our budget column, our cost, our actual cost column, and our difference. And then finally our balance with our estimated budget and tracking our cost to date. Let's look at how I filled this in for us. Okay, the budget. We estimated this by making some assumptions, okay? We assumed on the people estimate that we would need 4 people for 5 months. So how did I calculate how many hours? See circle 1. For one person, we're going to assume that they can work 20 days a month at 8 hours a day, which equals 160 hours per month. That's for one person. Now we know we need them for 5 months. So one person to work 5 months would be 160 hours per month times 5. That's 800 hours per month for one person. Now, remember we had 4 people for the project. So 4 people times 800 is 3,200. All right. The next circle that we have is circle number 2, explaining how did we get here. So we had the 4 people at 3,200 hours multiplied times the rate of one person per hour, right? And that gives us our final budget for people right here. All right, and circle number 3, this helped us out with our materials, right? If we follow this line along to the 154,833, how did we get there? Let's follow this out to number 3, and it looks like we combined our budget for our materials. In this case, it was our seeds and our soil, and we added these 2 together to get 154. Now, when we add our people costs plus our material costs, we get 86 million. Don't forget our contingency planning. Contingency is our circle number 4 explanation. Contingency is 20% of the 86 million. So we're going to multiply 0.2 times the 86 million to get 17 million. Now, we add 86 million plus 17 million to get our final budget. Okay, that's our balance. All right. For example, my task to go to the store, if we're going to look into detail, I'm going to go to the store. I estimated it was 1 hour. It actually took 1.5 hours. And the cost for that one person is 27,100. So I estimated it would be 27,100. The actual cost is 1.5 times 27,100 to equal 40,650. The difference between these two, between our budget and our cost, is 13,550. But we should write down what the cost actually was to me over here in the balance sheet, so we can track our costs. Okay. Next line down is our seeds, right? I thought I would need 1 bag of seeds for material. I'm going to estimate I needed 1 bag. In reality, I needed 1 bag. The cost would be 34,833. Well, let's look across what really happened. I recorded my estimate. This is my estimate. I actually spent 30,000. So remember, this is my estimate, but I spent 30,000. So I did okay. If I take the difference between my estimate versus my actual, I have 4,833 remaining. So there might have been a sale that day on seeds, and I got it cheaper. If I go to the next line down, we compare the soil. The soil, I'm estimating I need 2 bags of it. And in reality, yeah, I needed 2 bags. That's great. I'm estimating that each bag costs 60,000. So I'm estimating it should cost me 120,000. But in reality, I actually spent more. I spent 140,000. I spent 20,000 more than what I estimated. Again, remember, I'm recording what did I actually spend in the balance sheet. And as I spend it, I'm going to subtract these along the way. From the 104 million, I'm going to subtract the 40,000, and I get 104,209,150. Then I'll subtract the 30,000 to get this number. Then I'll subtract the 140,000 for this number. So overall, our final budget was 104,249,800. Now, the question is, let's take a step back and look at the important columns of budget, actual spend, the difference, and our balance. Are we over or under budget? And in this case, we are over budget at this time. Our estimating was wrong. The time it took to get to the supplies and for the cost of the supplies. Remember, I thought it would take an hour. It took an hour and a half. I thought that this would cost $120,000 for 2 bags. It actually cost me $140,000. So when we tally up what we have spent, $181,933 versus the actual cost. So this is our budget of spend. This is our actual spend, which is more. So our actual spend is higher than what we budgeted to spend. So that means we are over budget. The last thing on this sheet, you can see the footnote below explaining that these, all the formulas that we used. And I will be giving this to you in your workbook. Next slide. The factors for success. Success factors. These are the metrics that you decide at the beginning of the project with the sponsor. These should look familiar, that you met your objective, you are on schedule, you are on cost, you met the scope, your quality of work was what you agreed upon, and whatever other metrics you agreed to with the sponsor at the beginning of the project. The key questions you should ask yourself are, what does success look like for this project? How will success be measured? Ask these at the beginning of the project. Next, I want to show you some examples of project plans and considerations for each, just at a high level. This is how I got the information for the blueberry project. As you can see, this is a list of different harvests or different fruits that fruits and vegetables you could be harvesting. We chose blueberries. If I look across here and I see when it harvests in January and February, which works out for me because my deliverable is in January and February. Now, the assumptions I would write down here on 90 days prior, I need to go ahead and make sure that I've started the harvest, right? So if I go 90 days prior, I need to back up 1, 2, 3. So I know that I'm going to be starting in October, okay? And then I know that I'm going to deliver my first batch somewhere in January, end of January, and then in February, probably mid-February, I would deliver my second batch, and I'd give myself time to close in March. Okay. Finally, our last example with some actual tasks inside here. I have, this is a sample project plan where I've colored the fall months in yellow and the winter months in blue. You don't have to do this, but it shows you a visual of where your harvest is in this case. And since blueberries are harvested in January and February, which we know, we'll need to back up 90 days to understand when our start date is. And that's how we come over here to our initiation phase and some of the things that you should be considering doing in your initiation phase. Each of the phases are in different colors. Light blue is the start of the project and the tasks that follow. Dark orange is the planning phase with some of the tasks that follow. This is just an example. Purple is our execution phase, when you're actually doing it. Gray is the monitoring and controlling. And remember, monitoring and controlling is happening during your planning and execution. As you can see, you will go back and you'll make adjustments if needed. And finally, your closure phase, and that's in green. We're going to give ourselves time to close down the project, make sure we've documented any lessons learned so that we are good to go for the next year of blueberry harvest. These are examples and only examples of ways to do checklists and how they fit into the big picture for your project plan. Finally, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me or Professor Dobson, and we'll be happy to revisit any of these topics. Have a wonderful day.